What's up, guys? This is Ellie, and welcome back to Eagle Eye Mysteries. Alright, today's mystery is we have a couple left in book one. Today's case is the case of the buried booty. Buried booty. Without further ado, let's begin. And now for a little background on the case. They have medals, they have scrapbooks. Eagle Eye Detective Agency, Jake here. Mrs. Arnold. Jake, I've got something terribly exciting to show you here at the Historical Society. I think that I found the long lost treasure map of Colonel Blue. You're kidding! The Civil War general who buried a fortune in Richview? That's fantastic! We'll be right there. Alright, let's go talk with the lady. Richview Historical Society. Mrs. Arnold has run the Richview Historical Society for years. She has tons of old papers and other historical objects here. Okay. Jake, Ellie, you must have a look at this. I was tidying up the attic this morning, and I came across a padlock chest. The chest was so old that the padlock broke apart as I lifted it. Inside was an old revolver and a scroll of parchment. The parchment is cracked with age, but it certainly looks like a map of some sort. I gave it to Mr. Arnold to examine. I'm convinced from the initial engraved on the gun and the age of the items that these belong to the famous Civil War soldier, Colonel Blue. We may have found the map to his buried treasure. Interesting and fascinating. Mr. Arnold, I've been studying the map all morning, comparing it with some of the maps we have here. It's a map of old Richview, all right, around the mid-1800s, I guess. Some of these old buildings still exist, and I recognize some of the landmarks marked by an axe here. For example, Lone Tree is over by Buccaneer Beach. Wraith Rock, as you know, is that huge stone in Riverside Park. Instead of marking the location of the treasure, this map gives 4 possible sites and some cryptic instructions. I suppose we could send dig teams to each location, but the Historical Society only has enough money at the moment to pay for one excavation. The treasure map is a crumbling piece of yellow parchment with a sketchy outline of the town of Richview in the era of the Civil War. The 4 landmarks are marked with a large black axis. Their names are written beneath them: Wraith Rock, Lone Tree, Liberty Tavern, and Harrison Hole. In spidery script on the back of the map are written these words: from President Jackson's namesake, 2 paces south, 3 paces east, dig 1 fathom deep. What could that mean? President Jackson's namesake? Could he be referring to the statue of President Jackson in Riverside Park? Wraith Rock is in Riverside Park too. I've checked to be sure that the revolver isn't loaded, but guns are not something to play with. Even an ancient one like this is a dangerous weapon. I'll hold it for you if you'd like to examine it. The revolver looks very old. The handle of the gun is wooden with a silver covering on either side. It's pretty fancy, actually. The silver on the handle of the revolver is engraved with the letters Call B Blue. I'm convinced that the revolver is authentic. It's exactly the type of Smith & Wesson that was used in the Civil War, and Colonel Blue commanded his regiment. Alright, so I guess this is now a treasure hunt. We have 4 locations to visit according to the map, and after that, we will tally up our information at the library. Let's check it out. We have Duffy's Barn, Buccaneer Beach, Sweet Treats, and Riverside Park. While investigating, I guess I want to keep the clue in mind. Mr. Duffy has had bad luck with his crops the last few years. If the treasure is buried here, maybe he'll be able to use some of the money to help fix up his farm. Aw, that's nice. I did a little research on the area before I bought this farm 10 years ago. There was a mining company here back in the 1800s. They dug shafts deep in the earth looking for silver. Mining was a really big industry in this part of the country in those days. When the silver ran out, they sealed up the caverns so that people wouldn't mess around in them and get hurt. And then you built a farm over the area? An ancient stone wall cuts across the field near the cave door. The wall looks as though it was made many, many years ago. Moss is growing between some of the rocks and the wall has crumbled away in places. The mine shaft that used to be here to be called Harrison Hold is sealed with a strong gate. The gate is securely locked. Context. Let's head down to Buccaneer Beach. That must be really some clean water if there's so many kids playing in it. Buccaneer Beach is a great place to go swimming. I bet these people had no idea that a treasure might be buried nearby. Yo, Sherlock Holmes types, what's happening? Out here to catch some waves? Hi, Steve Shred, we've missed you from the couple of cases. Not today, Steve, we're on a case. Do you know anything about that tree up there? Lone Tree? Yeah, that's like a totally ancient landmark. That old hickory tree has been there for centuries. My grandfather proposed to my grandma there. I go up there to read sometimes, you know. It's got an excellent view. I heard a legend that this was the first tree planted by the settlers who founded Ridgeview in the early 1800s. Timeline sorts of fit. Lone Tree is a weathered old tree that sits on top of a cliff overlooking Buccaneer Beach. Under the tree is a wooden bench that faces the water. There are dozens of initials, names, and dates carved into the bench. Okay, so we have a tree, sort of a mine shaft, I guess. I wonder what Sweet Treats used to be. Imagine if the treasure was buried there, they'll have to remove the foundation and everything. How far is a phantom anyway? Mr. Con is the owner of Sweet Treats. We're lucky to catch him while he's in the shop. Why would the owner not be in the shop? Oh well. Mr. Peel. Mr. Con has always been interested in history. In fact, I think he bought the site as the location for his ice cream parlor because it used to be a famous tavern. That's right, I started Sweet Treats on the site of the old Liberty Tavern. I like the idea of owning a store on a famous landmark. In the 1800s, the Liberty Tavern was a favorite drinking and socializing spot. But when alcohol was banned during Prohibition in 1912, the tavern went out of business. I've got the old tavern sign back here above the counter for luck. It's an antique. Indeed, this is the tavern sign. The sign that hangs above the sweet treats counter says Liberty Tavern. The Liberty Tavern sign appears to be very old. It is made of oak wood, riddled with termite holes and cracked with age. Mr. Khan, what do you have to say about the case? I've studied the Civil War in great detail. It's a hobby of mine. Actually, my wife says it's an obsession. Anyway, each year I join up with a group that reenacts some of the famous battles like Gettysburg and Shiloh. We use replicas of the old guns and other weapons used by soldiers in those days, and wear costumes that look exactly like the uniforms of the Union and Confederacy. We honor the soldiers from that war, but it was a terrible waste of life. Almost as many Americans died in the Civil War as in every other war this country has ever fought, combined. Well, that was in 1990-something. It doesn't include all the latest exploits that the US have entered. I have no political statements about that. It's just a fact. All right. And finally, we have Riverside Park. I think this is the first time we've been here. Let's check it out. Wraith Rock is right here on the edge of the path, and there's a statue of Andrew Jackson. The monument to Andrew Jackson is a life-size bronze statue. The plaque at the foot of the statue reads, President Andrew Jackson, 1767 to 1845. He lived pretty long. Dedicated by the Daughters of Old America, Ridgeview, Chapter 147, July 4th, 1967. The statue is facing north towards Wraith Rock. Wraith Rock. Oh, it looks like it has a face. Wraith Rock is about 3 feet tall and 6 feet wide. The west side of the stone resembles a ghostly face. This rock has been here since the founding of Ridgeview. My dad says that the name comes from its spooky shape. Wraith means ghost. Andrew Jackson, according to this thing, is the president of the time, but the statue was not there until 1967, so it's not in the correct time period. But why are the 4 axes in that area? I'll bet we can find out some background on Colonel Blue here at the library. A little research into the Civil War might help us decipher the map. He said Phantom. I'm beginning to suspect that it's something to do with water. Colonel Blue is quite a famous figure here. You might try checking some of our local history books to get the details of his story. I vaguely remember that there was some talk of a buried treasure. Have you spoken to Mr. Khan, the owner of Sweet Treats? He's a real Civil War buff. He and some of his friends take part in Civil War battle reenactments every year. They research the time period and battles very carefully, then create authentic costumes and reenact the strategies used by famous Civil War generals. I'm sure he'd love to help you with your investigation. A book on local history has a chapter on Colonel Blue. Nice. Colonel Blue was a Confederate Army soldier during the Civil War. When the war ended and the South had lost, Colonel Blue fled with a strong box containing some of the gold reserves of the defeated Confederate forces. Determined not to let the Yankees get hold of the money, Colonel Blue stayed on the run just one step ahead of the Union forces. In an effort to elude them, he veered north and entered the peaceful town of Ridgeview. Knowing that the end was near, Blue buried the strongbox somewhere in Ridgeview. When his pursuers at last caught up with him, he drew his gun and fired, and was killed in the battle that followed. His treasure was never found. Residents of Ridgeview have searched for the treasure ever since, and while they search, they argue about the man named Bew Blue. Was he a noble Southern officer protecting the Confederate treasure? Or was he a thief stealing money he was supposed to guard? We will probably never know. I'm not sure how factual this book is, if you ask such a question. My guess is there to stimulate thought. Alright, in the reference section, an American history book has a chapter on the Civil War. The Civil War began after the secession, which is a withdrawal from the United States, of the Southern states. It seceded for a complicated set of reasons, including the desire to continue keeping African Americans as slaves. The Southern states formed the Confederate States of America and named Jefferson Davis as president. The United States refused to allow the South to secede, and the bloody four-year war began on April 12, 1861. The war ended on April 9, 1865, when General Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. A book on United States President has a chapter on President Andrew Jackson. President Andrew Jackson, 1767 to 1845, was a great general in the War of 1812. He was elected president in 1828. He was considered the president of the common people. Because of his backwoods Carolina origins, he was nicknamed Old Hickory. 1812. Alright, I think we visited all the locations. We should have all the information. The map says that the treasure is buried near President Jackson's namesake. We've got the clues we need. Pick the 5 clues that you think will best show the historical society where to dig. Okay, this is important. The map says that this is a clue, President Jackson's namesake, so we must choose that. His namesake is Old Hickory. Civil War is 1865. Lone trees and Old Hickory tree was planted in Ridgeview in the early 1800s. That's important. So if Lone Tree is near Buccaneer Beach, so Buccaneer Beach is the location of the treasure. Those are the clues we needed. Now choose the site where you think Colonel Blue buried his treasure. And as I mentioned, it is the Lone Tree. You're right. The treasure, if it exists, is buried near Lone Tree. Let's check the evidence. The treasure map says that Colonel Bew Blue showed 4 possible sites for the buried treasure, but it said that the loot was buried near President Jackson's namesake. Wraith Rock in Riverside Park was one of the landmarks on the map, and it's near a statue of President Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was president before the Civil War, but the statue of him in Riverside Park wasn't put there until 1967. Colonel Blue couldn't have known that it would be there. At the library, we learned that President Andrew Jackson was president before the Civil War, so Colonel Blue would have known about him. We also read that President Jackson's nickname was Old Hickory. Colonel Blue would have known that too. The tree, called Lone Tree up by Buccaneer Beach, is a hickory tree. The founders of Ridgeview planted it as a landmark many years before Colonel Blue arrived. Colonel Blue buried his treasure underneath that old hickory tree. Well, technically it's a couple of paces away from it, because digging underneath a tree will damage the roots and cause the plant to die. The Richview Courier wrote an article on Ellie's treasure find. I'll stick it in a scrapbook. So we have detective, me, and a person who likes to scrapbook. Nancy, why didn't you participate in the case solving? Oh well. We made the papers. Good going, Ellie. Cool. A real Civil War treasure, and Ellie found it. Let's check out that article. Richview Courier. Young detectives uncover Civil War treasure. A fortune in gold was found today by digging teams led to the site by Ellie of the Eagle Eye Detective Agency. Ellie deciphered the map that led us to this historic find, beamed Mrs. Arnold. Ellie's historical know-how led the young investigators to a treasure site at Buccaneer Beach. Ellie realized that the cryptic words President Jackson's namesake referred to his nickname Old Hickory and must have meant that the treasure was buried under the old hickory tree we call Lone Tree. There was one more treasure in the strong box, says Mrs. Arnold. It was a note from Colonel Blue, and it said, "If my nation cannot have this gold, then her enemies never shall." Ellie and Jake didn't just find the gold, they found the true personality of Blue, lost for 100 years, and proved that he was not a thief. That was the greatest detective work of all. And that brings a close to the case. If you've been enjoying the series, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Right, thanks guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, and as usual, this is Ellie signing out.